Well, we've just heard from all the politicians on today's big stories, but now it is your turn. We're live and we want to hear from you on Raw Politics, your call. Good evening, welcome to the programme. And tonight, I'm delighted to say we've got Brian Maguire, who is joining us, taking us through the next 45 minutes or so. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And first up tonight, we are talking about Brexit. How can we get away from that subject? We're asking you, a soft Brexit, is it the best option or indeed betrayal? Tonight, of course, British MPs will be voting on a whole range of different options, potentially Britain staying inside the customs union. That looks like it potentially might be the most popular form of Brexit in the UK Parliament. Is that good, a softer form of Brexit, or a betrayal of what the referendum was all about? Trying to sign trade deals with other countries, for example. What do you think? Good idea or a betrayal?
And is political experience overrated? We'll see with one of our guests a little later on. But comedian Volodymyr Zelensky, he played the president in a popular Ukrainian TV show, but now his political ambitions, they're no joke. He came top of the poll this weekend in Ukraine's presidential elections, and we're waiting to see what happens with him. And also in Slovakia, anti-corruption lawyer Zuzana Kapitova, she has won her presidency's vote this week as well. The first female president for Slovakia, also lacking political experience. So the question, is political experience overrated?
Yeah, lots of disruptors out there. Fascinating what's happening, particularly in Ukraine. But also tonight, and finally, we're asking about immigration or emigration. Which one are you worried about? Are you worried about immigration or emigration? Really depends where you are, actually. If you're in North and Western Europe, there does seem to be this concern about immigration, clearly, given the record numbers we've seen come to Europe in the last couple of years. But for many elsewhere in Europe, in the East and particularly in the South as well, it might be fears of losing communities, of people moving to big cities, the brain drain, essentially. So what are you more concerned about? Whether you're in Romania, whether you're in Norway, whether you're in Spain or France, is it immigration or emigration? You know what to do? Pick up the phone. We want to hear your views on all those subjects tonight. Our team standing by there, ready to take your calls. Our number 00800 333 3702. You can email us rawpoll@euronews.com, or indeed, if you're on the old Facebook or social media, use the hashtag #RawPolitics. Get in touch.
And joining us in the debate tonight, Claude Moraes, a British MEP from the Labour Party, sitting with the Social Democrats here in the European Parliament, and journalist Beatrice Rios from Euractiv, also joining us. Great to have you along tonight.
Hi, Brian. It's going to be an interesting programme, but first, let's cross over to Lyon and to Euronews headquarters for the very latest news this hour from Isabel.
Hello and good evening to you, both Darren and Brian there. Well, our top stories. British MPs are set to vote on 4 indicative options that could chart a new course for Brexit and break the deadlock that has shackled the House of Commons. House Speaker John Bercow has approved 2 votes on future trading relationships, one on a UK-wide customs union with the EU and another calling for a so-called Common Market 2.0. One other amendment calls for a public vote on any withdrawal deal that is passed through Parliament, and the last seeks to revoke Article 50 if Parliament is faced with a no-deal Brexit. Algeria's state media is reporting that embattled President Abdelaziz Bouteflika will step down before the 28th of April. The news comes a day after the formation of a new caretaker government headed by newly appointed Prime Minister Noureddine Bedoui. President Bouteflika has faced more than a month of mass protests calling for his resignation. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has suffered a major setback in local elections. His ruling AK party has lost control of the capital, Ankara, to the main opposition Republican People's Party. It's the first time the AK party has lost Ankara since it was founded in 2001. President Erdogan says he will appeal the result. And those are our top stories. Now back over to you, Darren and Brian.
Isabel, thank you very much indeed. A full news bulletin coming up from Euronews headquarters at the top of the hour. Tonight we're asking you a whole range of questions, not least of all, is political experience overrated? Considering the unusual political events we've seen in Ukraine and to a degree Slovakia this weekend, but also when you look at the five-star movements in Italy, potentially even Emmanuel Macron in France, Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump in the United States. Is political experience overrated? We'll get the view of one politician, at least tonight, on that. But what do you think? Pick up the phone, call in. Also, are you worried about immigration or emigration? There's a survey out today saying that people in Romania, Hungary, Greece, Poland, Italy and Spain say there are more concerns with migration out of the country than people coming. And you look at the effect it's having on communities and populations. Romania, for example, has seen a 10% decline in its population in the past decade. And also tonight, what is the best option for Brexit? Is a softer Brexit a good option or a betrayal of the process? You know what to do. Pick up the phone, 00800 333 3702.
Let's go to our guests for the soft Brexit. Claude Moraes, no Brexit, referendum, common market 2.0. What's on the table tonight?
Well, Brian, I can't lie to you. You know me. So I think in my heart, I sort of think, it's such a mess, you know. I wish it could be put back to the people. But the mess is going to go through its iterations. And I think soft Brexit is probably where it's at. I know my party back in the UK is going for this Customs 2.0. But, you know, going for something like this right at the end of the process, you know, they're going to sort of walk into issues.
But the British people didn't vote for Common Market 2.0.
No, they didn't.
So is this going to be a case of we'll agree something, then we put it to the people, or is this going to be forced through in the House of Commons?
I really hope they put it to the people. I mean, I'm pretty plain speaking about this now because I think there was a really good piece in the FT by Robert Cooper about many MPs not actually knowing. I'm not disparaging them, but not knowing about some of the options. And what we mean by that is that you've got this 2.0 issue, but you've got issues of free movement in there. So, of course, that was Theresa May's red line, but it may be a red line also amongst some Labour MPs. They need to know what this is about.
In your party, a large part of the Labour Party wants a second referendum. Its leader's not prepared to give that yet, at least. Yeah. And on the Tory side, Common Market 2.0 is not leaving the European Union, essentially. So how do they keep either of these parties together without some form of two-step approach?
Yeah, the sort of rule-taking and other issues. I mean, I'm in favour of free movement, but there'll be some that don't even know that that's part of it. They need a seminar on it, you know. And so I think what's going to happen here is rapidly they're going to find in these indicative votes there are many
which are non-binding.
Which are non-binding. Then again, the referendum was non-binding. Whisper it. But I think technically, I don't want all the hate mail now and everything. But
I think it's on its way already, Claude.
Technically not non-binding, as all referendums are.
Okay.
But I think what they'll find is very quickly with these four options, there are many things wrong with them. So the Tories will find they can't strike international trade deals, and then finally they will realise that you have to compromise, and we will end up with a compromise.
Beatrice, do you think there's going to be a compromise, or are we going to go through this copy-paste process of meaningful votes again?
I think it's going to be really complicated to reach a compromise because every single option is going to hit one of the red lines that every single party has. And what the EU has been asking for is for a cross-border, cross-party agreement. So they would need to find a solution that is acceptable for every single party so that we can have a majority within the House of Commons.
That sounds easy, but they can't even get inter-party agreement, never mind cross-party agreement at the moment, Beatrice.
And even if they do, then they would have to go to the European Union. And the European Union needs to accept that agreement because at the end of the day, even if we go for a customs union, the customs union is not something that it's limited and is written on paper. We have to negotiate the terms of that customs union.
Well, let's bring in a caller because we've got Elizabeth on the line from Birmingham in the UK. Good evening, Elizabeth.
Good evening, Darren.
Hello. Just on this question of Brexit and whether it should be a soft Brexit or whether that is a betrayal, which one do you think it is?
Well, it's not actually Brexit, is it? Because we will still have zero tariffs through Europe, and Europe will set the tariffs for the rest of the world for us. Plus, you've got freedom of movement. You know, what I don't understand, Darren, and I've worked in Europe for nearly 30 years, and I love Europe, but I am a leaver, because I just think Europe is democratic. And I think, they tell us they love us, then set up a trade agreement, and let's move on. The referendum was very clear. Do you want to leave or stay in the EU? And the country voted they wanted to leave.
And that's true, and there's no doubt about that. But the problem is there's about a million different ways to leave, which have got a million different consequences.
If you can't get up an agreement with Europe, then just go on to World Trade Organization. That way everybody loses, because it seems to be as though Europe's forcing us down that road. Case of, cut off your nose to spite your face.
So do you
I know we're sending a message to the rest of Europe, but I think, England or Great Britain is quite capable of standing there and making a success.
So you think that no deal would have negative consequences, but that ultimately in the end it wouldn't be that bad, it would be preferable to staying in the customs union, for example?
Well, the customs union is not much different from the EU. We'll still have their rules and regulations. As I said, they will set all our tariffs. We're not able to negotiate that. So I think actually, yes, coming out on a hard deal and being capable of setting up our own agreements with the various countries, and I'm sure the EU would be very quick to sign one. They're as reliant on us as we are on them.
Claude, what do you think about it? Just stay on the line, Elizabeth, because we're going to bring in Claude here to react to that.
It's actually quite a widespread view in Britain that, first of all, there's a lot of confusion about what no deal means, WTO rules and so on, and also this idea that all we want is just let's get out and then let's have this free trade deal. I think the issue with it is I don't think anyone, politicians, anyone is really explaining it better, and that is the EU is a unique construct. When you leave it and you want to sort of have all the kind of advantages of that free trade, you're doing it with a single market and a customs union. You're doing it with a highly developed, unique place. That's the bit that people, quite understandably, are going to have to get their heads around. And that's the difficult bit, because for Britain to do that, you have to take some difficult parts as well as the cake and eat it discussion. Of course, in people's minds, they always think, well, why are they being mean to us? Because we just leave and then we have all the cake as well, which is the free trade, but none of the rules. And I think the problem with the European Union is that it is a unique thing. It had the single market customs and it had all sorts of rules with that.
So, Elizabeth, are you having your cake and eating it?
No, I think, compromise is, the way I've run my professional life and my private life. But I don't see enough compromise. I think it's become very one-sided.
But Elizabeth, don't you think it's a case of doing the least possible damage, as Nick Bowles is saying here tonight as well? The Common Market 2.0 says the option that will do the least damage to the British economy. You don't run your life that way, do you?
I don't mind that way if that's also perhaps time limited so that we can actually sign our own trade agreements going forward in the future. If you put a 5-year span on that, we can come out of it when we wish, or are we going to have another debacle about that one?
Just finally and quickly, Elizabeth, if it means splitting the Conservative Party, do you think Theresa May should still go for no deal?
If she could get no deal through, everybody in their manifesto, Labour, Conservatives, all said that they would get us out of Europe.
Okay.
So unless they're going to try and get a backlash in the next elections, which will be then too late for the British public.
Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed for calling in. Let's go straight to Bram, who's in the Netherlands. Good evening, Bram. What do you think on this idea of a soft Brexit? Is it the best option for the UK, or a betrayal of what Brexit was all about?
Good evening. I think the whole Brexit is a betrayal, because the Leave campaign told so many lies about EU, about the money that they are taking from the British, and I'm really curious if the British really think they can strike the same trade deals as they can do within the European Union. And my question is, why does the Remain campaign emphasize more that there were so many lies told? by the Leave campaign.
Well, I mean, you guys can pick up. Let's go to you first, Beatrice. I mean, this is a common thing about lies, and you know, there was a report out by the Electoral Commission in the UK in which the Leave campaign were felt to have broken the rules. But irrespective of that, it doesn't get away from the fact that, you know, people did vote to leave. It was a democratic vote, and most people who voted to leave would probably still vote to leave, even though they know what they now know.
Of course, the problem is not necessarily the vote itself, but the problem is that when they vote, they didn't have on the table what Brexit was actually going to mean. So now we're putting all those options on the table now, even after the date the UK was supposed to leave the European Union. And now we're trying to make people understand what are the consequences of every single option. Because as Claude was saying before, leaving the European Union is not simply just leaving and everything goes smooth. We need to understand that that has consequences, and then a future relationship with the Union that has consequences as well for the UK. So the problem is not necessarily that people vote on the perception that nothing was going to happen, but it's also that they were voting for something that they didn't exactly know what was going to mean.
But Bram, just on this point, how far would you go to keep the UK inside the EU? Like, do you think they should be allowed to take part in the European elections, for example?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Why do you want to keep them in?
Because it's a very big trade partner of our country, of the Netherlands, and a good ally. And I think the European Union is very important for peace and stability in our continent. And I think the British really easy stepped over this point too. And I just heard Elizabeth from Birmingham, and she wanted to leave, and I hear more times that they want to leave maybe without a deal. But I think, do they really realize what consequences that is going to have? Do they really think they live in the British Empire for hundreds of years back? Because now you cannot survive without the European Union. That's my vision. And of course, there are different visions. But do they really understand the consequences?
Indeed, Bram, thank you very much indeed. Many, of course, would disagree, saying that the UK would prosper much more outside the European Union. What do you think? A soft Brexit, is it the best option, or a betrayal of what Brexit was about? Also, we want to take your calls tonight on immigration versus emigration. Which one are you worried about? And is political experience overrated? What do you look for in your politicians?
OK, and over in the House of Commons, somebody has superglued themselves to the security glass there. If you haven't superglued yourself to any security glass, call us. Our lines are open. The number is 800-333-37002. We're waiting. Take your call.
Join us after the break in a few minutes. We'll have you on the phone and we'll get the reaction of our guests. Join us on Raw Politics, your call in just a matter of moments. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Your call tonight talking about immigration versus emigration, which are you worried about? Also talking about Brexit, which is the best option, a soft Brexit, or is that a betrayal? And also on this idea of political experience overrated, whether you think actually politicians being politicians for a long period of time is a help or a hindrance, given what's happened in Ukraine and Slovakia, who've both chosen leaders this weekend, to a degree, with no political experience. One a TV comedian, the other an anti-corruption lawyer. We've asked you whether it is overrated. So far at the moment, 59%, so what, nearly 6 out of 10 of you saying yes, it is overrated. What do you think at home? Use the hashtag rawpolitics.
And we have a caller, Robert from Wales. Robert, are you there?
Yeah, hiya.
Robert, you haven't superglued yourself to anything, have you?
No.
Let me ask you, soft Brexit, best option or betrayal?
Betrayal.
Why do you think it's a betrayal?
Yeah. It's not what most people voted for. Everybody I discussed it with, in work and in the area where I live, everyone wanted to leave on the World Trade Organization rules.
Did you vote to leave under the World Trade Organization rules? Did you know about that at the time, or is this something you learned about afterwards?
No, that's my personal opinion. We should have left the EU 20 years ago.
And what do you know about the World Trade Organization rules? How are they different from the European rules?
Well, we'll be free to our own trade deals for start.
Do you know how many the British government have arranged so far, since promising to have them all rolled over in time for Brexit?
Yeah, but we were restricted to what we could do before we even leave. I mean, the EU were making rules to make discussions before we even got into discussing what trade deals we could do. I mean, the first few months of talking to the EU was all about they wanted us to settle the finances. We wasted a lot of time talking about how much we owed the EU.
So how would you feel...
Which was ridiculous.
Robert, how would you feel if the referendum result was reversed? In a vote, if there was a second referendum?
No, I think they're just traitors.
What were traitors to what, though?
Well, most of the constituencies in the country voted to leave. It was only places like London that actually voted to stay. But most of the parliamentary MPs represented constituencies that voted to leave. And they're not even representing their own constituencies.
We were just talking about this during the break, actually. Robert, stay on the line. You're from Wales, aren't you? Interesting there that there was a comparison and a talk about London, that this also is a... And Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, but a disconnect between kind of big cities like London and Manchester and Glasgow that vote it one way and people in other parts of the country who feel very distant from these places.
There is, and I think, Darren, it's also, if it's not just about economics, it's become a cultural identity issue. And what's happening is then people use economic arguments, so they'll feel that they want Brexit because of all sorts of issues, control, feelings of control, what was the past like, you know, I mean, the caller's talking about wanting this 20 years ago. People have some fixed views about what they wanted. Immigration's a big issue, free movement's a big issue. All of these issues are not necessarily just economic issues, but you get all these phraseology now. Okay, let's go on WTO rules, let's do this. And I think we've not benefited from politicians and others really explaining any of that.
Well, or you could argue that the people who've been campaigning for no deal are much better at a message than others.
No deal's an option. See, the thing about it is leaving's an option. You know, we'll survive. No deal's an option. We've been preparing. The issue is going into that. You know, what is the WTO? WTO is a big international organisation that's going to stick us at the back of a queue. No big economy in the world trades just on WTO rules. And the impact of that is enormous. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't leave without a deal. We can, and we will survive. It'll be tough, but we'll survive. Somewhere in there, we have to have a discussion. But very often, I feel when people are talking about that, they're talking about a whole issue of control, getting out, leaving. It's become a big thing, and I think there is a division between cities.
But this issue of betrayal and being a traitor, where does this come from?
Yeah, I mean, this is now morphed into quite a populist kind of discussion. So you saw people coming down to London saying that the politicians are betraying them. Others are London is full of... I mean, many people in London voted leave. It wasn't a straight vote. I mean, but London is identified that way. Scotland is identified that way. But many people in Scotland voted leave too. So the issue is how the country's divided. The country is very divided. And it's divided on a subject where over 25, 30 years, we had a bit of a filter. People knew about the European Union, but it was treated in quite a different way from other member states, even neighbouring member states, i.e. people didn't know. If I give you a good example, I mean, most even graduates didn't know much about the single market or the customs union or all these
Let me ask you about this. Is this something that is a common problem across Europe? And let me bring back the question of betrayal, the sense of betrayal, the language of being a traitor. Where does this come from?
I think that language is maybe too strong, but I would understand that if you
But it's used, though, so...
Yeah, indeed. But I think that, of course, it's understandable that if you go and vote into a referendum and then years later, when you're supposed to put in place the decision that was voted for during that referendum, you see that the politician that's promised you they would do, they are not doing it, of course you would feel betrayal because you have voted for that, because you voted then to be elected for, because they were going to go for that referendum. But then at the same time, we still have the same problem. The question was too vague. We're saying whether we leave or not the EU, but we don't understand the consequences of that. And we are still arguing about what are the consequences of leaving the Union and what kind of future relationship do we have? Do we want to have with the Union?
I did think the most interesting thing that that Robert there said on the phone, and thank you, Robert, for calling in, was that everyone he talks to, like he was very much of the impression that people have not changed their minds, and that is a big part in people's thinking. Is that, you know, particularly for Leave voters, someone put it very well the other day. Could you imagine if Britain voted to remain inside the EU, and yet Parliament were determined to take them out?
But this argument as well is super complex. How do we find a way through this in a sensible way? Because, you know, we heard the language here: traitors, betrayal. How do we turn this into another narrative which is more open to discussion? Do we need the extension now?
Well, first, in what Darren said is not to throw out what he said, because I think newer voters, people who didn't vote, are accounting for this kind of extra percentage of people who want to remain now.
Yes.
But people who are entrenched are very often the ones who originally voted Leave. And I think anyone who's a Remainer and so on needs to understand that, because it's still a big mountain to climb.
We've got Eamon from Dublin on line 1. Good evening, Eamon. What's your view on this Brexit? Are you in favour of a softer Brexit, or do you think, actually, you know what, when you think about it, that will probably betray what people in the UK voted for?
Well, just to correct you, I'm not. I just happen to be in Dublin at the moment. I live in Uri, County Down, which is in the UK.
Yeah.
No, I really feel that people were kind of left to make a decision on grounds which were spurious, to say the least. For instance, in this part of Ireland, we have a referendum commission, which is an independent body that sets out pros and cons for decisions to change the law, such as referendum. Whereas in the UK, I remember we received a pamphlet issued by the government and paid for by us, setting out the government's understanding of what way we should vote. And as well as that, we were bombarded by advertisements from organisations acting illegally.
The problem with this, Eamon, I get the point that you're getting at here, but the problem is, like, we could spend the next 5 years having to talk about the referendum, the last one. It's happened. We've got a result. What do you want to see happen now? Let's not look backwards.
I'm just trying to say that the point is that given the referendum that we had, there's the logic of the situation would be to have a rerun and give the people a choice, a proper choice this time round between what is going to be on the table when Theresa May, please God, affects some sort of agreement so that we can decide whether or not we will go with it or else go to back to the EU or not leave the EU, should I say.
And just very finally, Eamon, I mean, how have you changed your mind? Would you vote the same way if there was a second referendum?
No, I would change my mind.
How did you vote last time?
I voted for Brexit the last time.
But now you think the UK should remain?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Eamon,
I think we're better together.
Interesting stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Well, there you go.
Okay, thank you.
Clearly, people do change their minds. Anyway, we're going to take a quick commercial break here on Raw Politics. Your call, we're asking you clearly about Brexit. Is a soft Brexit a good option or a betrayal? What about political experience? Is it overrated? And after the break, we're going to be asking you whether you're more worried about immigration, people coming in, or emigration, people leaving where you live.
So let us know what you think on those topics. Our lines are open. You can call us on 800 333 37002.
And join us in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Your call as if things couldn't get stranger in the UK. I think it was about a dozen climate change activists seem to have stripped down to their pants in the House of Commons.
Hot stuff.
Hot stuff indeed. Apparently being removed by the police. Lots of you get in touch, though, on this issue of Brexit, whether you think a soft Brexit is the best option or a betrayal. Andy has tweeted in saying, treacherous MPs trying to betray the vote again to keep us attached to the EU. They should stop trying to appease the Remoaners and respect the vote. We should leave on WTO rules. We know there will be some disruption, but nowhere near Project Fear 2.0. Andy, thank you for that message. And I think we've got John on the line.
Yeah, John from Limoges in France. I think John wants to talk to us about Brexit. John, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
So Brexit, the options on the table today, are they going to betray the whole Brexit ideal? How do you see it?
I don't think it's a betrayal of Brexit. I think it's a betrayal of their individual manifestos. I think we should just leave with no deal.
And what do you think the consequence of that would be?
None. No consequences at all. Maybe the lettuce in the shop will be 10% more expensive, but I don't think anything else will change.
Do you live in France or in the UK?
No, I live permanently in France.
Okay. Florence, no big change with Brexit, no deal. True?
I'm really interested in the even recent polls showing people feeling there's no problem with no deal. A lot of people actually think no deal is what we have now. I mean, there was a recent poll showing that. So I think, probably the warnings about no deal are just falling on a lot of deaf ears now, because one of the big problems was that there were many warnings about the post-referendum malaise of the economy. Now people think that that's Project Fear. So I think what are genuine worries about no deal, which I think are real, are now just, people are just being very casual. So, and I think the no deal, if you look at the car industry, the supply chain, they are very real. They will.
There's €1 trillion of flows out of the UK last year.
They will shock the economy of Britain.
John, John, if you're still on the line, what do you think of what the German Deputy Foreign Minister, who said that Brexit is a big show, and I can't say that word, he said that's not very diplomatic. 90% of the cabinet have no idea how workers think, live, work and behave. Politicians who were born with silver spoons in their mouths, who went to private school, were the people who will not suffer. Do you think he's got a point?
Probably has, yes, but I think all in all, we just, the people in the street just want to get out of Europe. There's a whole big issue about Europe, the way it's going, the makeup of Europe, the future intentions of Europe. It's not just one single thing. I think the other speaker who spoke just then said that it's going to be, lots of problems. I don't think it's going to be lots of problems of us leaving Europe. It's going to be difficult. No one's saying it's not. It's just that we're going to just have to adapt to it.
John,
I can remember before the EU that, things came from Europe. We travelled to Europe. It was difficult. We had to stop. We had to get a stamp on our passport. We had to have the car checked, things like that.
That's also true, but that was also a time when, and things have moved on from that. Just very quickly, John, I assume you are British, as in born in Britain, but now live in France. Many people question this. Would you describe yourself as European?
No, not really. I'm British. I don't think any British person has ever been European.
Okay.
We're removed.
Well, there you go. Maybe
our society is completely different from Europe.
Interesting, John. A man who's British, lives in France, but wouldn't describe himself as European. What do you think? Maybe he's got a point, maybe he hasn't. We have got another caller on the line from the Netherlands, who I think is also called John.
Paul from Rotterdam. Paul from Rotterdam.
Good evening, Paul. What do you think of this Brexit malarkey? Is it a soft Brexit a good option or a betrayal of what people had to say?
It is John,
Hello.
apparently. John, how are you?
Hello. All right, thank you.
Did you hear Darren's question there?
Yes, I think it's a total betrayal.
Why is that?
Why? Because 406 constituencies voted to leave and 242 voted to remain. And at the end of the day, 9 regions voted to leave and 3 regions voted to remain. And out of the MPs, 160 MPs are leavers and 486 are remainers.
Yeah, but John, but in some ways that's a perfectly valid point and no one can disagree with that. The problem is there are loads and loads of different ways of leaving. That's what currently and if you completely just walk away, no one really quite understands what the consequences might be. They might be really, really bad. So in those circumstances...
The United Kingdom 100 years ago was one of the biggest traders in the world. And it can still be the biggest trader in the world.
Compared to China?
Yeah,
well, no, not compared to China, because everything that we get now comes from China.
OK, well, John, we have to leave it there, but it's interesting. Many people would say 200 years ago, Britain obviously ruled a third of the world. That's not the case anymore. Things have changed. Britain's not quite, potentially, as much Great Britain as it was.
It depends which way you look at it.
OK. John, thank you for calling in. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
We're going to take a very quick break. Clearly, lots of people have got lots of views on this Brexit malarkey.
And keep calling in 800-333-37002. We want to hear from you.
We've got 5 more minutes left. Join us in about 2. Welcome back to Raw Politics, Your Call. We've had John, we've had Paul, we've had John. Now we definitely do have Paul from Rotterdam and the Netherlands on this issue of Brexit, whether you think a soft Brexit is the best option for Britain or betrayal of the referendum result. Paul, what's your view? What do you think?
Yeah, my view is people are underestimating the actual no-Brexit deal. Because really what's happened is the government really didn't explain to the people what Brexit means. And I know that May took 3 years to go to the EU to try and make this deal, but she made the deal by herself. What she should have done, she should have talked the other people from the different,
Just quickly, Paul, what would you say to those people who voted to leave, saying, I know what I voted for, I wanted to leave the European Union, and 3 years on nearly, we still haven't left?
Yeah, I know, but like I said, all I can say to the people is, you don't know what you've actually voted for. My opinion is, stop it altogether. Count your losses and carry on the EU itself.
OK, Beatrice, let's get a quick comment from Beatrice in this as well. Is it too late for people to change their minds, or should the government facilitate another phase with an extension where people can settle down, have another think about this?
I think that would be a good compromise. You decide on what do you want the outcome of Brexit would be. So you decide on the agreement, whatever it forms, including a customs union and single market, and then you put that to vote. Because that way people would actually be voting for something really concrete, and not just between leaving the European Union or not, but without knowing the consequences of it.
And do you think that the European Union has the patience for this, or does it really just want this done now?
I think it has the passion as long as it reaches to a concrete result. Other than that, I think for the EU, it's time to move on.
OK, Claude, we're close to the end of time. Concrete result, is there anywhere on the horizon?
Yeah, we need to spell out to the EU that we either want a general election or a referendum now. We need to be grown up. And then I agree with what's been said, that it's really pointing now to getting a compromise that nobody likes and really putting it probably to vote in the end, because nobody's going to like what the MPs are coming up with.
Is this the way for them to wash their hands of it?
No, we're just going to say we've kind of slightly run out of time, and I want to thank Paul for calling in, who was essentially, I think, saying that we should revoke Article 50, which is one of the options that MPs potentially have tonight. Yeah. But since we have run out of time, it's time now for our last words. And I'm going to give the last word to Jean-Claude Juncker, the EU Commission President, who's clearly very frustrated with this process today and launched into a tirade against the former British Prime Minister David Cameron, saying we were forbidden from being present in any of the referendum campaign by Mr Cameron, who is one of the great destroyers of modern times, because he said the Commission is even less popular in the UK than it is in other EU member states. He argues if you've been able to take part in this campaign, we could have asked and also answered many questions that are only being asked now.
Cameron was the greatest.
The greater destroyer of modern times. I think might be a slight exaggeration. Anyway, that is all we've got time to. Thank you very much to our two guests tonight, and indeed to Brian.
My pleasure.
For helping us out. Maeve is back tomorrow. Hopefully you will be too. Join us on Raw Politics, Your Call. Until then, from all of us, good night.